One of the most legendary battles in the history of One Piece comes to an end, all of God Valley is destroyed, and the whole insane truth is finally revealed. But there's a lot more to this than meets the eye. The echoes of Zebeck and God Valley continue to reverberate in the present timeline, so let's get into it. You guys know how this works. If you like my videos and you want to support them, click like and comment right now for that YouTube algorithm. And these One Piece chapters are only getting crazier and more unbelievable in this final saga, so if you don't want to miss future reviews, please subscribe and hit that notification bell to turn on all notifications. In the previous chapter, there was one thing that happened that I feel could be pretty easily overlooked because of everything else that was happening at the same time, so I do want to talk about it right now. Zebeck makes it clear that he doesn't consider Imu to be human. In fact, he sees Imu as a monster who underestimates humanity, and he warns Imu not to downplay the power of humanity. He follows this up by reminding Imu that his ancestor, Davy D. Jones, was actually the previous king of the world before that title was somehow usurped by Imu. Imu is clearly afraid of the Davy name and of the Davy bloodline. He wants to erase this bloodline from existence so that none of Davy's descendants could one day inherit his will and fulfill his promise. We don't know yet what exactly the promise was, but it must be something that Imu is extremely afraid of, such as overthrowing him and taking the title of King of the World away from him. It really seems like Oda is giving us more and more hints that Imu is not just a normal human or just like a high-ranking celestial dragon with a strong devil fruit. There seems to be more to Imu, including something that is clearly inhuman. First we have the immortality, then we have the strangely OP demonic powers that don't seem to be devil fruit powers in the normal sense, and now we have Zebeck, someone who is aware of the hidden history of the world and someone who clearly knows about Davy D. Jones and about Joy Boy, stating outright that Imu isn't human. To me, all of these things combined suggest that Imu really isn't human in the traditional sense. He may have started out as a human called Nerona Imu, but something happened along the way. Maybe he sold his soul to the Sea Devil in order to take the title of King of the World away from Davy. Maybe he was possessed by some sort of demonic creature. Or maybe some sort of devil killed the original Imu and assumed his identity. What do you guys think? Who is Imu really? And why does Zebeck make a point of referring to him as an inhuman monster? Let me know down in the comments. In the last chapter, we also saw that eventually, and unfortunately, Zebeck's body was taken over by the Dami Reversi power, he turned into a demon, and he went after his own wife and son. Thankfully, the absolute legend that is Kuma was able to save both of them right in the nick of time, although Imu seems to think that Zebeck did his job and that he took out his own family just like Imu commanded, and as tragic as that is, I think that Zebeck probably thinks the same thing. At the end of the previous chapter, Roger and Garp confronted the demon Zebeck and prepared to fight him in the epic final showdown of the God Valley incident. And then, right before the battle began, we saw Zebeck using the voice of all things to communicate with Roger and Garp telepathically. Even as his body was rushing to attack them, his mind told them to please help him by killing him right now. This tells us that even though Zebeck's body is now under Imu's control, he is still conscious of what is happening on the inside, and inside his own mind, he is still himself. This makes things even more tragic because Zebeck's consciousness is not like asleep while his demonic body goes on a rampage on God Valley. No, he is fully aware of what's happening, and like I said, at this point, he probably thinks that he killed his own family along with who knows how many innocent people, even though he didn't want to. It really is sad that such a tragic fate befell Zebeck, such a badass and likable character, and I really hope that Imu and the Celestial Dragons are going to get what's coming to them very soon. The latest chapter is called Echoes, and it begins with Garp asking Roger if he also heard Zebeck's voice, even though they didn't actually see him talk. Then, as Zebeck moves to attack them just as he did at the end of the last chapter, Roger and Garp fight back, and the epic battle unfolds over several fantastic pages. You can tell that Garp and Roger have to give their absolute best just to stay alive in this fight, and they are clearly risking their lives right here and now. At the same time, you can also tell that they know Zebeck is not the bad guy here, and that he is being forced to do this. So while they know that they have to stop him for the good of everyone else, they also feel guilty that they have to put him down even though he's not a bad guy. This battle is both intense and intensely emotional, and eventually the multiple attacks that are exchanged generate a gigantic wave of Conqueror's Haki that splits the sky over God Valley, and Roger and Garp end up crashing into the mountains. But even though they were hurt by Zebeck's overpowered attack, both Garp and Roger are able to get back up and continue fighting. As the Marines call Garp and the Roger pirates call Roger, asking them both to retreat to safety, they both promise to return, but first, they have to finish this fight. Garp says that he initially came to God Valley with the intention of putting both Zebeck and Roger behind bars, but now obviously things have changed. Roger says his plan was to get Shocky and the loot and just get out of there, but now he can't leave until Zebeck is defeated. If they just leave Zebeck to continue his rampage, many people will die, including possibly some members of Roger's crew. So the two rivals have no choice but to team up right here and now in order to defeat Demon Zebeck, because on their own, neither of them stands a chance. I do kind of wish that they brought up the fact that the Celestial Dragons were like hunting innocent humans for sport on this island, and that this too is something that needed to be stopped even before Demon Zebeck, but that's just me. As Roger and Garp launch another joint attack against Demon Zebeck, we see that Rayleigh has now reached the ship and he brought Shocky to safety. The other Roger pirates are also returning to the ship and bringing all the treasure that they managed to retrieve from the island. Meanwhile, the Rocks pirates are now officially finished. Kyo tells his men to take the ship and leave the island, as Shiki declares that after everything that just happened on God Valley, the Rocks pirates are officially dissolved. Zebeck is no longer able to lead them, and so all the Rocks pirates go their separate ways. But before Kaido and Big Mom go their separate ways, they have a quick talk. Big Mom tells Kaido that he owes her a lifetime debt for giving him his devil fruit, and that she will make him pay one day. Kaido says that she didn't give him anything, he just managed to win the competition to capture the devil fruit. He also proclaims that he will establish a mighty crew where violence is everything. Big Mom responds to Kaido by saying that he is getting ahead of himself because he will never be able to surpass her. Straussen screams at Big Mom to stop chatting and leave immediately with as much treasure as they can get their hands on, but Big Mom insists to Kaido that she will one day come to collect on her debt. For his part, Kaido says that when she does, he will just throw her back to where she came from. This idea of Kaido owing Big Mom a debt will be brought up again during the Wano arc, when Big Mom tells Kaido to tell her about his road poneglyph in order to repay the debt he owes her for his devil fruit. Back then we didn't know how he got his devil fruit, but now that we know how it all went down, you can't really say that she gave him the devil fruit at all. She did get to it first, but she was totally going to give it to one of her children, and Kaido attacked her and took the devil fruit by force. This made Big Mom mad and she wanted to kill him for it, so yeah, Big Mom is really reaching by calling this a lifetime debt. In a different part of God Valley, Whitebeard meets with a man who looks a lot like Marco. He is named Polo Graham, and he is the leader of the Polo Pirates. He is also clearly Marco's father. Get it? Marco Polo? Anyway, Polo says that he is a fan of Whitebeard and he is very impressed with the man's power. He also tells Whitebeard that since his pirate crew is falling apart and he doesn't even have a ship to return to, the two of them can just work together and join forces. But Whitebeard tells them to get lost because that idea just sounds burdensome. We see that other members of the Rocks Pirates, I guess former members now, including Stussy, Ganzui, and Gil Bastar, are also running away with some treasures of their own. Stussy is upset and she's asking what happened to Whitebeard and where he is now. It is also implied that at this point, Gilbastar had the same devil fruit that Perona has now, because we see that he is being accompanied by a ghost that looks very similar to the ghosts that Perona can create in the current timeline. As all of this is happening, believe it or not, we have Dragon actually doing something important yet again. On board one of the Marine battleships, a fed-up Dragon is aiming his rifle at a superior officer and threatening to kill him unless he allows the surviving civilians on God Valley to board the ships, which is of course the only way to save them from certain death. Presumably Dragon tried asking nicely first and the officer refused, so Dragon decided to risk everything and to take justice into his own hands. Just as I predicted many chapters ago, God Valley was the major turning point for Dragon, and because of what happened here, the future revolutionary is now in open conflict with his fellow Marines. We also see that Rayleigh and Gabon have left the ship and returned to the island in order to look for Roger, apparently ignoring his clear instructions to evacuate. They tell the rest of the Roger pirates to move the ship to a safe distance and then wait for them to return with Roger. I really have to stress just how heroic both Garp and Roger are being here, but also Rayleigh and Gabon. Garp and Roger are risking their lives fighting a huge demonic monster on an island that is literally falling apart in order to save others and buy them more time to evacuate. And Rayleigh and Gabon are willing to risk their own lives, despite already being safe and in the clear, to make sure that their captain comes back alive. They are all absolute chads through and through. Next, we see that Emu is now no longer the monster that he was before, and instead he seems to just be controlling Saturn's normal body. He looks exactly like Saturn, but the eyes are clearly Emu's. After ordering Zebeck to destroy everyone on the island and ordering the world government to erase the island from history, Emu departs from God Valley on a world government ship. The narrator then explains how this order from Emu was carried out by the Marines from G11 base and Cypherpole 6, who effectively erased God Valley, the human hunting tournament, and the infamous incident with Zebeck from the historical record. But even though this is what eventually happens to God Valley, the flashback is not over yet, and neither is the epic battle between Garp, Roger, and Zebeck. During this legendary battle, the other half of the massive God Valley mountain is destroyed. Garp and Roger are doing their very best to damage Zebeck by coding their attacks in Conqueror's Haki, but it hasn't been working because Demon Zebeck has been using his own incredibly powerful Conqueror's Haki to cancel out their attacks. Roger tells Garp that they only have one chance to win this battle, and it is a very high-risk one. They both have to infuse all of their remaining Conqueror's Haki into a single, massive combo attack, and they have to use that to overwhelm and defeat Zebeck. But the risk here is huge. If they do this, both Roger and Garp will no longer have the strength to do anything at all. So if the attack doesn't work and Demon Zebeck is not one-shotted by this attack, then Roger and Garp will be extremely weak and practically helpless. In other words, if they fail, they'll be killed very quickly by Demon Zebeck right then and there. And for all the epic hype around this battle, it is also a very sad and emotional moment. Roger is literally holding back tears, and we see that Demon Zebeck himself is crying. Even though, thankfully, Kuma managed to save Zebeck's wife and son at the very last second, Zebeck probably doesn't know that. He most likely thinks that he killed his own family, which is just so tragic and dark. And this is why the real Zebeck genuinely wants Garp and Roger to win and to put him down for good. The final double page of the chapter gives us that final incredible attack in all of its overpowered glory. Roger's attack is named Hino Kagutsuchi no Ace, and Garp's attack is called Infinitum Explosion, but obviously these attack names are subject to change pending the official translations. Roger channels all of his haki into his sword, and the attack consists of multiple sword thrusts that cut Zebeck's body. Garp's attack channels all his haki into his fists, and it consists of him throwing multiple massive punches at the same time, reminiscent of Luffy's Gomu Gomu no Gatlin. The end result of this generational attack is the apparent defeat of Zebeck as we see the dark demonic energy flowing out of his body. The insane, desperate gamble that Roger and Garp undertook seems to have paid off, and the narrator tells us that after this incident, the world government did everything it could to hide it from the world. But those who were in the Rocks Pirates crew were incredibly strong and influential, and they shaped an entire era. So the legacy of Zebeck continued through them and their actions. The fall of the Rocks Pirates on God Valley was a massive, earth-shattering event, but the echoes of Zebeck and his infamous crew would continue to reverberate long after Zebeck met his tragic fate on God Valley. And by the way, what do you think of the final battle, the outcome, and Zebeck's fate? Let me know down in the comments. At this point, I find it so interesting to think about how Teach, aka Blackbeard, went from the helpless kid on God Valley to the ruthless pirate emperor that we know today. We now know that his mother Eris survived thanks to Kuma rescuing both of them, and while we don't know how long she remained alive after God Valley, we can assume that she had enough time to tell her son the truth about what really happened. So Teach should know that Zebeck was his father, and yeah, that makes a lot of sense because he named his ship the Saber of Zebeck. He also seems to know about the Davy bloodline, and his actual goal is to become the king of the world because he believes that that is his sacred duty to fulfill Davy's promise. Now, Eris apparently died at some point between God Valley and Teach turning 12, because when he joins the Whitebeard Pirates at 12, he is apparently an orphan. But by this time, his master plan seems to already be in motion, and he sets his sights on obtaining the Yami Yami no Mi Devil Fruit by any means necessary. And it is super interesting to me that Blackbeard grew up idolizing his father, who died fighting the current king of the world, Emu, and yet he himself turned out to be a far more ruthless pirate and person than the actual Zebeck. Even though Zebeck had a very negative reputation, he was actually a character with a lot of redeeming qualities, including his willingness to sacrifice everything to protect his family. Ironically, Blackbeard lives up to the reputation of Zebeck a lot more than the actual Zebeck did. I would assume that Eris told her son how Zebeck really was, but maybe she didn't get the chance, and so Blackbeard, knowing that Zebeck was his father, wanted to become exactly like his father. But instead of becoming like the real Zebeck, he actually became the ruthless and cruel caricature that the world presented Zebeck to be, even though most of that reputation was undeserved. It's kind of crazy how Shanks' father turned out to be a far more irredeemable, cruel, and evil character than Blackbeard's father, and yet Shanks turned out to be a lot less cruel and ruthless than Blackbeard. So I wonder if Blackbeard just didn't know the real truth about Zebeck and decided to become the kind of person that he falsely thought his father was, or if he thought that maybe his father was actually too good and that was his weakness and the thing that caused his death. So because of that, Blackbeard decided that he would have to become a much darker character than Zebeck. I am fascinated to see what will happen between Blackbeard and Shanks now, and what Blackbeard's master plan will ultimately turn out to be. Now that we know that Blackbeard is basically the last surviving member of the Davy clan, what he ultimately plans to do becomes even more interesting and even more important to the overall story. Will those who inherited the wills of Davy and Joy Boy team up against Emu, who clearly fears them both? Or will they end up fighting each other, which will give Emu an opening to get one over on both of them? Let me know what you guys think will happen between the new Davy, the new Joy Boy, and Emu down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this One Piece video and you want to see more in the future, leave a quick like to let me know. And like I said, these chapters just keep getting crazier and crazier, so be sure not to miss my future reviews. And the only real way to do that is to both subscribe and hit that notification bell and then select the option that says all. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, see ya, Space Cowboys!